In the criminal justice system, many cases have had a huge effect on history. In Rockland County, the dedicated students who investigate crime and punishment are members of an elite school known as Tappan Zee High School. These are their stories.
How is the criminal justice system organized in Rockland County?
The DA's office obviously prosecutes all crime in Rockland County. We have jurisdiction countywide. We handle 43 parts. That means all the different justice courts, county courts, grand juries, and everything else handling all crime in Rockland County. We have 5 town police departments, 4 village police departments. We have the sheriff's department. We have the parks department, and state police cover our area. So we're the common thread. We have a lot of local departments that are very good, but we are the one commonality over the entire county, handling every case that happens in Rockland County. So a lot of what we do creates a lot of the uniformity that goes on. My job under the law says I have to prosecute all crime that happens in Rockland County. That basically says you just have to react. When the police arrest somebody, you have to take them into the grand jury, or you have to go into your local courts and prosecute them. But you know what that's saying? That's saying that's my legal duty. Is that ethically my duties? Do I have a broader ethical duty here as DA to do more? Is it right that I could just sit back and say, I'm just going to be a reactionary. I'm going to wait for crime to happen. I'm going to wait for the police to do their investigation and hopefully arrest somebody. And if they do, we'll react by prosecuting them. And my belief is that my duty is to make the public safe any way I can. That means being actively involved in crime prevention measures. By being involved in crime prevention, you're saying a potential victim doesn't have to become an actual victim. You might be able to stop that crime from happening by being proactive. And that's what we do.
Dr. Frederick Zugaby was the chief medical examiner for Rockland County for 34 years, performing over 10,000 autopsies in his career and generating international acclaim in the forensics field. He established the foundation of Rockland's disaster protocol, including medical emergency response teams and coordination training among law enforcement. Zugaby's extensive influence on the modern crime and punishment system in Rockland is best seen through his leadership in forensic science's application to crime and punishment beyond pathology. Zugaby invented a technique of softening fingerprints that enabled one to identify marks left behind on a long-deceased victim. This technique is now used as a standard of forensics. He is also globally known for his research on the crucifixion and the Shroud of Turin. Zugaby has appeared in documentaries, testified in courtrooms, and was on the boards of many hospitals. Not once did a jury fail to accept his testimony over opposing expert witnesses. Zugaby has been named one of Rockland's 25 most influential people of the 20th century.
My father transformed Rockland County. When he took office here, we were like a bedroom community of New York City. And right around the time he took office, we started seeing more and more connection to New York City and real negative connections. Because Rockland County was looked at as a sleepy community. If you dump the body there, if they don't have any expertise. He came in countless, whether it be mob hits or other type of criminal. We were like a dumping ground for a lot of the area around. When he came in, it was a strange time. Today, 20 years after that, it stopped. We never saw any more. Once he came in, we saw it slow down dramatically when they realized what a knowledgeable forensic scientist he was. He was constantly coming up with new innovation, on things on how to solve crime, stuff that became national standards. In 1984, they found a young black woman dead behind it was a former Holiday Inn on Route 59 in Nanuet. And she had been there for a while. No eyewitnesses, nobody had anything on it. And so it was critical, when did she die? How long has she been dead? And it's a very difficult determination. She had been eaten partially by animals, she was decomposing and all them. But how do you pinpoint the time? Because the person that we were looking at that had an alibi. And my father was, in the first time, my father's my star witness on the case. Imagine that, putting your own father on the witness stand in a murder case. He determined she was dead for 5 days. Now, how could he be that precise? He did it by looking at the stages of the fly larva, the maggots, and the different stages there. And he was able to determine it was 5 days based upon the stage of the fly larva. Nobody had ever done it before. The defense attorney thought it was nonsense. Cross-examined the hell out of him about it, and we convicted him. And when we reconstructed the case, it was right on the button. It was 5 days. Since then, I've seen it on CSI, I've seen it on all the different crime shows, offices across the country. That's a prime way of determining time of death. He was the first one I know of ever saying it. It was way ahead of his time. My father never accepted what the norm was. He didn't accept anything. He analyzed everything to see what was really going on. He didn't accept any givens. He would really dig in and to find out what really happened. And he was very open-minded. In this job, when we have cases, you have to question everything to make sure that you're being fair to both sides. My father's job as medical examiner was, if you look at the law, it says determine manner and cause of death. That was his legal job. That's all he had to do. But he believed as a public servant, he had an ethical duty to use his job to the fullest, to do everything he could to make people's lives better. He spent extensive time on these deaths that occurred at hospitals and other, natural cause deaths and all them. He would study them as a research scientist. He'd bring the family in to counsel them so that their own families weren't at risk of falling to the same disease and what they could do. And he got really into organ donation. He was one of the first people I know to really push cornea donations, and he was able to harvest them at the autopsy and all them. And today a lot of people see because of his early work. My father probably had the single largest effect on the way I operate today. And my father didn't cause Letchworth to shut down, but my father was very influential on things that happened at Letchworth. He said, I'm very troubled by what we see here. I've haven't studied this, but I'm seeing a lot of the residents choking to death. They're choking on their food, and it's from a suppression of the gag reflex, similar to people being in a restaurant and having a couple of glasses of wine or something and then choking on their food. He said they used to have the farm up at Letchworth, and these residents would go out there and work all day. They loved it, and it was very gratifying to them, and they would work the farm, but they'd be very tired, and they'd come home and they'd sleep well, and they were proud of what they did. And then the state came up with the crazy idea that they can't work in the farm anymore unless you pay them minimum wage. What did the state do? They shut down the farms. And how did they make up for it? They ended up medicating them heavier because they didn't have an outlet. What his position was is, I saw that change. I saw when that ended and they started medicating, we started seeing more and more of them choking to death on their food. And the state ended up adopting his findings on it.
Letchworth Village was opened in 1911. It was built to house and treat mentally disabled people of all ages. At this time, it consisted of 130 buildings and was spread out over 2,362 acres of land. The design of many of the buildings is said to be inspired by Monticello, a famous building that was the center of America's third president, Thomas Jefferson's main plantation. This community was founded on the principle that a picturesque setting allows for stronger recovery and treatment than its high-rise equivalent. The lands surrounding the buildings were incredibly fertile and were used for both recreational and agricultural usages. In February 1950, Hilary Kaprowski tested his polio vaccination at Letchworth. Reports of poor treatment of patients date back to the early 1920s, just 10 years after opening. Under the Letchworth system, patients were separated into 3 mental categories or 3 states of feeble-mindedness: the moron group, the imbecile group, and the idiot group. The idiot group consisted of those who were said to be unable to be trained to be of any benefit to the state. A certain Dr. Little noted in a 1921 report that many of the members of this group were children. Many of these children were able to comprehend learning but were either too young or were not given the opportunity because they were considered different. The patients consistently looked malnourished and underdressed. The staff claimed that this was because the state did not provide them with enough supplies. However, this was not the case. The realities of the living conditions at Letchworth were kept a secret for a long time. Letchworth was officially closed in 1996. To this day, many patients and staff refuse to speak about their experiences at Letchworth. However, many of the few accounts we have recall a laboratory containing many jars filled with the brains of past patients. It is generally said that the building was shut down as New York State decided to move towards more humane psychiatric treatment. Today, the buildings remain untouched and in a state of intense decay.
In 1981, I was only in this office about 2 years, and the Brinks case happened. It was a domestic terrorist group, well known to law enforcement, the FBI in particular, and they came up here and decided to rob a bank at the Nanuet Mall. And they showed up there and they blasted through the armored truck with shotguns, and they killed the guard. They stole all the money, and right on Route 59 there at the corner on Mountain View Avenue, the police came upon their U-Haul, and as they approached the truck, the door swung open and they came out with automatic weapons and executed 2 Nyack police officers right there. The reason we had sales tax in Rockland County, it was instituted back then to be able to pay the cost for the trial. It was so expensive. I think it cost $5 million back then to try them here.
I was working at the Nanuet Mall at the time, and the store that I worked at was called Bamberger's, which is now Macy's. People came to the mall and they held up a Brinks truck. The truck driver of the Brinks truck was killed on the spot right outside the Nanuet Mall, but at the time we didn't know that there was a shooting going on. We just knew that there was something happening in security. It really did change the way security was thereafter, after that happened.
On October 20th, 1981, Brinks guards Peter Page and Joe Trombino were set to pick up $1.6 million from the Nanuet National Bank. As they exited the bank, a red Chevy van moved through the parking lot. Unbeknownst to Page and Trombino, the van contains the ringleader of the robbery, Gerald Wayne Williams, or Matula Shakur, and the other members of the Radical Black Liberation Army. Meanwhile, David J. Gilbert, Kathy Bowden, and other unidentified former Weather Underground members waited in a rented U-Haul truck, a yellow Honda, and a white Buick to serve as getaway cars. Trombino and Page brought the money to the Brinks truck. A perpetrator shot at Page and Trombino, killing Page instantly. The robbers left the scene and switched into the Buick, Honda, and U-Haul truck. The truck was stopped and a shootout began. Officer Waverly Brown and Sergeant Edward O'Grady were tragically killed in the incident. Forced to flee the truck, perpetrators entered the yellow Honda and the stolen car. The Honda later crashed while fleeing, and the perpetrators in the car were apprehended. Police used evidence found at an apartment in Mount Vernon to track down a Chrysler 2 days later. In the car were perpetrators Samuel Smith and Sequoia Odinga. A gunfight ensued, killing Smith and leading to Odinga's arrest. Investigations led to the arrest of several others in the months following the robbery. After the arrest, the Goshen jailhouse was put under maximum security. Gilbert, Weems, and Clark described the shootout and murders as justified because the officers interfered with them taking their rightful money. The Brinks robbery of 1981 left an indelible mark on Rockland County. Following the robbery, a sales tax was implemented in an attempt to recover from the cost of the trial and has not been removed since. Today, the O'Grady Brown Memorial Scholarship keeps the officers' memories alive while helping students become officers as well. In Dr. Frederick Zugaby's novel, Dissecting Death, Secrets of a Medical Examiner, page 148 recalls a crime directly related to our school, Tappan Zee High School. In 1973, Tappan Zee High School chemistry teacher Joseph McGowan brutally raped and murdered a 7-year-old Girl Scout, Joan D'Alessandro.
So how long have you been teaching at Tappan Zee High School?
Since 1969.
And what is your relationship to Mr. McGowan?
Joe McGowan was a chemistry teacher at Tappan Zee High School. I taught social studies, he taught social studies. When we came back to school after spring break, it actually was ignored. I mean, people talked about it, but there was no official reaction to it at all. They didn't do any kind of counseling or any discussion or explanation about what had happened.
Do you think the school would act any differently today if this were to occur?
Oh, very definitely. Schools are much more aware of the impact of events like that on students.
Joan's mother remains fighting McGowan's parole. In her daughter's name, Rosemarie D'Alessandro created Joan's Law, the federal law which mandates life in prison for the killing of children under 14 during a sex crime. Thanks to Joan's mother, this law helps families all over the country.